Hey, Callie.
Hey, Michelle.
How's it going? Have you missed George W. Bush?
So much I think about him every single night. I think, what is this little scamp up to today? Painting his pictures, hiding his
Mhm.
secrets. How do you paint when you have so much guilt? I guess he just doesn't feel guilty, or maybe that's why he paints. I don't know. I don't even want to
Yeah.
humanize
No.
him.
I think that's interesting. I do think it's an interesting aspect of him. As I said before, like his father and like Poppy Bush and James Baker and Donald Rumsfeld, those guys are like true believers, man. They're like, what we do is good and right, even, if there's collateral damage. And I do think, W is like, God damn, we're all a bunch of monsters.
I know he is a
No.
little more feelings about it, but
Yeah, not enough to stop it or not
for
be a George
sure.
Bush, right?
Right.
Or, I'm not really trying to give him like more humanity than he deserves. At the
Same.
same time, I do think he's the one guy in the family who's like, oh, okay, if you say so.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Right?
Yeah, I
Like,
believe
sure, this
that.
is good for everybody.
That's probably
But
why
I
he's
think
got
that's
the funnest party daughters.
probably, you're totally right. He's painting his dog pictures and he's like, just don't let me have any thoughts. Just don't let me think
Yeah.
any thoughts.
No thoughts for Bush. Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah,
Right.
also I guess I want to acknowledge how Colin Powell has died since the last time we recorded.
Bye.
Bye,
That's
bitch.
right. Bye, bitch. Thanks for nothing.
Yeah. I hope that our podcast inspired him a little
I
to
hope so too. Wouldn't that be
leave.
great if he
Yeah.
was like, I just can't take it. That secret intent was the nail in my coffin. It's the final
Our
nail.
influence, yes, very influential.
I do hope so. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the rest of them will, find their way to the cemetery too.
I know they all do
So
live like way too long. That is a
it's really
common theme.
crazy.
Too fucking
Do you,
long.
too fucking long. Do you think they get that like super pure like oxygen? You know what I mean? Like they go in and they get on like they do that. They put on their oxygen mask and they get like more pure air than we do.
I know, yes, yes. Whatever it is, yes. They are doing something weird and evil. I mean,
they
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
besides just having good health care, which is helpful.
Okay, true. Yes, access to healthcare. And also weird blood rituals in the woods or something.
Mm,
And
I almost
doctors.
forgot about that.
Uh,
Mass human sacrifice. It's
yeah,
worked for centuries.
yeah, and doctors.
Yes, and doctors, and doctors. Yeah. All right. Well, good. Good. That's right. Thank you for bringing up Colin Powell. I'm glad. I'm glad we didn't forget to say bye.
Bye.
Um. Yeah. So, all right. So we've got lots of stuff to talk about. Picking up somewhat, at least from where we left last time. And I just want to, kind of make this reminder. Oh, also, last time I kept saying National Guard when I should have been saying Air National Guard the whole time. Like, not all National Guard units are for pilots, but the Air National Guard certainly is. So every time in the last episode I only said National Guard, I meant Air National Guard. So there's my
Got it.
there's my I don't know what you call that, my fixer from last time.
Correction.
Um my
Correction
correction.
issued. Yes.
That's it. That's my housekeeping for this episode.
Yeah.
But I also want to remind us, just as we move along in this and we talk about the Bushes and the Saudi Arabian royal family, that we keep in mind that it was FDR it was February 14th, 1945, a true sweetheart deal when Franklin Delano Roosevelt made the original deal with Saudi Arabia of arms for security. So
Mm-hmm.
this does go back that far, and we can even see the grandson of Abdul Aziz continues, who is FDR made that deal with Abdul Aziz, and we will, as we close in on 9/11, we will see his grandson still in the mix.
Wow.
So I know, right? So it's
Besties.
besties, like, nepotism,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of, right. And just like, I think a lot of times too, for us regular plebes out here, things can sound really pointed, like, aha, like everything's all connected. Well, it is all connected. It's all connected, like, through the White House. Like, there's just such a small group of people that really have this much money. So some of these things, this much money and this much power, that's belongs to a very small group of people. So it is kind of automatically all connected. At the same time, I don't think that that takes away from the sting of it and the horror of it. I also just don't necessarily know how much it adds to the conspiracy of it, if that makes sense, because the power is a conspiracy. I guess that's what I want to say. Like, it's not more like,
Yes.
it's all well, isn't that so weird? And I'm just like, well, not really, when you think about the fact that there's only about 600 of these people, like, it's all
Right.
overlapping,
And you
right?
need to think about like why power is only given to such few people and like what their agenda.
Right.
It all has to do with it, you know.
Yep. Agreed. So, all right, so let's not forget that as we move through this, because although that does go back to FDR, and every administration in the White House since then has certainly upheld that deal. It was really the Bush family starting in the 80s that was like, I feel like we could really grow together when it came to like the Saudi royal family, which in Saudi Arabia, the Saudi royal family, they are the government. So it is a monarchy there, and I
Yes.
know we've talked about that over the period of time. Like they base their it's one family that
They
runs the
can just
government.
kill journalists and
They can
nothing
just kill.
happens.
Yeah, they can do anything they want. They have carte blanche. Like they can make fatwas, and it's like when they decide that they believe something. Like for a while, it was you'd get in trouble in Saudi Arabia if you, and this was in the 80s. You'd get in trouble in Saudi Arabia for saying that the Earth was spherical, not rather than
Whoa.
flat, because one of the kings had become a flat earther. You know, right? Eventually, his nephew, who had gone up into space, a billionaire, bought his way into space. That's not new. Even though
Wow.
we hear a lot about it now, these Saudi Arabian princes were doing it, way back then. Went to his like uncle and was like, "Uncle, I saw it myself. It's a ball. It's a circle." And then the king lifted the fatwa.
Wow.
But
People can
right.
change their opinions. What an amazing
Well,
story of growth.
I know, right? And but even the king was like, if you were not my blood, I wouldn't care.
I would
It
have
was on.
killed you.
Probably that's actually a really good point, because he was breaking the fatwa by
Wow.
saying
Yeah.
that. But the Bush family is the one in the United States. They're really like, let's take this to the next level. Like you already enjoyed the sweetheart deal with the United States, and to point out, also why this is it's oil. I'm sorry, it's oil for securities. So like the United States gets, I said arms for securities, but I meant oil for securities. So the United States gets oil, and in return they give, like, not only guns to Saudi Arabia, but they provide personnel to do and train personnel. So they do, like, they train the people. The United States trains the people who fight against the Saudi royal family and the people who protect the Saudi royal family. Just to be clear, right? This stuff
Classic.
is, it's so convoluted, but the Saudi royals are exactly the same. So like, it's really birds of a feather in like such a big way. Okay, so
Wow.
but the Bush family, upped the ante on this relationship with the Saudi royals by revolving it more closely around corporate business, shared proxy wars, and even like personal and familial connections. So their relationships were tight, if not exactly, of course, completely trustworthy, right? From either directions. So the Bushes did with Saudi Arabia what they do best. They created absolute chaos,
Oh,
including throwing them, right? Yeah,
yep.
including throwing themselves into the mix. They're like, yeah, you could pull the rug out from under me. I just think that'd be really bad for you, too. Like,
Wow.
chaos is their game. So it's mutually assured destruction that's married to the opportunity to control, like, territories like terra firma, like swaths of land and nation by controlling the industries that define those nations within the global capitalist market, right? So
Wow.
I mean, what bedfellows is this? It's like we can either both just completely explode or we can stick together and control everything.
Chaos.
Chaos. Looming at all times, it's exciting shit, I guess, if you're into it.
Yeah.
So right. All right, and one of the groups that I want to talk about today that I find really fascinating, and it's one of the key organizations here, and it gets swept under the rug a lot of times because you and I had talked about, the Promise software that went into the computers. We talked about BCCI Bank. Like, there are these things, they're not as exciting as some of the political squabbles, proxy wars, these other things that are right in our face. These are the dealings, these are the financial dealings, and these are the deals that are made in the background, which I think are incredibly fascinating, but we don't hear about them a lot because people kind of automatically feel like it's over our heads. But it isn't really. When you think about it like this, when you think about the fact that finances are when you think about the fact that economics is nothing but a shell game, and you know what the shell game is when they get the three cups out in the alley, or it's
Yes.
three card
Yes.
Monty, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's all it is. And so when you realize that, you don't have to feel confused because you're not going to win at that game either. Out in the alley, you're not going to win. The guy who's running that game, or the person that's running that game, the house always wins, even if it's in an alley, right? So, like, as long as we understand that it's that's all it is, and we're going to lose every time, it's not as complicated as maybe the words might make it seem. So I'm going to break
Mm.
this down a little bit, and so that we don't have to feel like it's too complicated for us, because once you get into the numbers, it's like, Ronald Reagan himself, he had some moments of just like, help me, even though I don't think he was a great person either. He would just say shit sometimes, like, there is no future. Like, he said that, like, during a State of the Union address,
That's
um
pretty
you know
cool.
right. And so, even he, came out one time and called it voodoo economics. He was talking about his own economics. Okay,
Oh
he was
God.
he was talking about trickle down, which was his own thing, and he was like, it's voodoo economics, or whatever. So anyway, which what he meant by that is, like, at the end of the day, it's just magic. Like, we make numbers appear and disappear. So there you go.
Wow.
That's right, and he's not wrong. Like, however he, that's how he chose to say it, but that's what he meant, and he's not, he wasn't making it up. So in 1987. This is late in the Reagan Bush Thatcher White House. I think we really have to add that in. There was no Reagan Bush administration. I mean, like, Thatcher, like, that was her White House as much as it was theirs. I mean, I out of that whole string of Reagan, Bush, Thatcher, Reagan had the least amount of power as far as I'm concerned in that
Wow.
whole, from my point of view. All right. But he liked Bush and Thatcher. He wasn't against that stuff. But anyway, this is late in his game, 87, and something gets kicked up called the Carlyle Group. And this is five partners with backgrounds in government and banking. I'm not going to read their names off because they won't mean anything to anyone. They're a bunch of powerful dudes none of us have ever heard of. One of them is Rubenstein. He's the only one I'll mention again later. So anyway, they get together. Their group is named Carlisle Group. I love this because it's another named after a hotel. I love how things are named after the hotels where they happen. Like Watergate was a hotel. The Bilderberg is the hotel.
Oh
Like
my
so
god.
anyway. I know. So like
Get
what's gonna
creative, you
happen?
guys.
I know what's gonna happen when we get conspiratorial. Is it gonna be like the La Quinta group or like
Damn. No,
something
hopefully
like
it
that?
happens to us when we're like snuck into the Hotel Monteleone pool or something.
There you go, the Monteleone group. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Especially if we're snuck in, we're crashing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's how you gotta do it in New Orleans. You know, you're gonna sneak into the hotel pool. So we're the sneaky Monteleone scandal.
I love it already. We should record an episode from from
Ha!
a pool.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down.
All right, sounds good. So what the Carlyle Group winds up being is and I'm going to explain what this is. It's a multinational private equity, alternative asset management, and financial services corporation. You see how they
What does
make that
that
sound
mean?
difficult? Well, you can also call it, I love this, a banking boutique.
No, you can't.
So, yeah,
What?
right. It's a banking boutique.
Ew.
Um, Ew, you already know that's bad. So what all private equity means is that it's a company, in this case, the Carlyle Group, and it uses its own money or or it raises funds to put into investments for either expansion or startups, or actually one of Carlyle Group's favorite things is buyouts. So
Ew.
Ew, I know. So what and it's private, so you're not going to see any of these exchanges on any of the stock exchanges. And there's more than one stock exchange, but nothing from a private equity firm is going to show up there. This is how all it is, all a banking boutique is the richest people around and their little masterminds, right? They're little bankers and hedge fund managers and stuff. This is where they're like, game? Where can we gamble, right? Can we play 3 card Monte all by ourselves?
Oh,
That's all it means,
oh
right?
god.
Where can we have right? So none of the little like plebeians can get a dime off of us. Where can we go and be alone and have our money alone and nobody will know what we do with our money? That's all that means. And that's all the Carlyle Group is. It's a private banking group, essentially. All right. So, and they don't need their businesses to really to make money per se, even though that does wind up happening. They're really just trading around their own money and doing these buyouts and these startups and these, investing in each other's. Hey, Danny boy, whatever, what do you got going on? Well, great, I'll invest in that. You know what
Ugh.
I mean? Like, right. All right. So, at the time that this group formed, the entire concept of private equity was really new. They were not the first private equity corporation to exist, but the entire business, quote, I put that in quotes because it isn't really a business. It's
Right.
a club, it's a
Mm.
banking boutique, right?
Ew.
So the whole concept of private equity was pretty new, and it probably had something to do with various like deregulations that the Reagan White House was famous for, right? That kind of allowed private equity to become legal. I mean, I don't know if it was specifically illegal before. I don't know if anyone had technically thought it up in the past. It just kind
Huh.
of fomented out of this like environment of rising corruption that was the Reagan Bush Thatcher White House and their administration. So this new type of banking allows the wealthy another way to keep their money between themselves and also off the public exchange, which is one thing. So that's one thing that makes the Carlyle Group the private equity firm special. But what makes Carlisle itself special as a private equity firm is because of their very impressive list of who's who. So I'm just going to read down a little bit of who winds up getting involved in the Carlyle Group because it's extraordinarily important, why this group is so important. So, first of all, you got Poppy. And W is there too. And if you remember me talking about W being like just having a real lack of motivation,
Yes,
like in the last
yes.
episode, like
Mm-hmm.
he just was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm like destined to do all these evil things with my evil family because I'm like evil and lazy too, like
Oh
whatever.
my
Like watch me
god.
not try. It's part of the way I show off my big dick,
Oh
right?
my
Whatever. It's
god.
by right. He's like, look at me. I don't even try.
Wow, so
But
cool.
I know, right? So like, you're like, I still think his kids are cool because of that. So the thing he winds up on the W winds up on the board of the Carlyle Group, like while his oil companies are failing, and even at the time
Lucky
one of the
him.
guys, I know, right, he's just a total failure. And one of the guys, at Carlisle Group is like, come on, let's bring W on the board. And apparently even people on the board were basically like, George W, the kid, like he's like, what is he drunk, or like what's his deal, like what's he do, what's his background, isn't aren't his businesses failing, isn't he kind of a loser basically. And one of the guys, it might have been Rubenstein, is like, come on, let's give him a chance. I mean, he's a Bush, what difference does it make, basically, is what comes down to it. So they put him on the board and he's on it for 3 years. And then finally the guy who got him on goes to him and is like, do you care about this at all? And W was like, no.
Oh.
Then he just basically cut him loose. Like he wasn't fired, It's the story of his life. But apparently, somebody actually asked him, like, do you care about what's happening here at all? And he was like, no.
Wow.
Wow. So, but he was there. So Poppy and W are both there. The former Secretary of State, James Baker, he's such a big player in all this. Former Prime Minister of Great Britain, John Major. Former Secretary of Defense, Frank Carlucci. Former head of the Office of Management and Budget, Richard Darman. Plus other heads of state from the Philippines, South Korea, Thailand. Former U.S. cabinet members, ambassadors, heads of various government regulatory agencies, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission, for example, or
Okay.
the Federal Communications Commission,
Oh.
and various directors of various stock exchanges. Okay, just to name a few. All right, these are all the people involved in Carlisle Group. Like, this is already just a shit show for regular people. Like, none of these people should be allowed to play a money game together ever.
No, no,
Like,
no,
it's
yeah.
right. So, what this does is it puts the market, and I'm using that word, it's sprawling. It might not be the entire global market at this point in the game because the market isn't globalized yet. But these people are the ones who really play a big role in that. Carlyle Group, among other private equity firms like Carlyle Group that come along later, are what actually wind up, 40 years down the road. We have a pretty singular global market at this point in time.
Wow, that's
So, what this,
interesting.
right? I know. I think so too. I think it's fascinating. So, what this does is it puts the market, I have to sprawl that word out every time I say it here,
Market.
because it's not going to stay in one place. It just cannot. It can't do it. It's like water. It has to find its own level. Their kind of market, another type of market. I would not say that is necessarily how it has to be, but for these people it does. So what this does is it puts the market in the hands of investors who are then in control or able to directly and significantly influence how government money, which is taxes, are used, and how the industries that tax money is used towards are regulated.
Oh, okay. That seems like a good
Okay,
system. Perfect.
right? Doesn't that? Yeah, I mean, what could go
No, yeah, no, no,
wrong?
no. I don't see any holes here.
I mean, I don't see any towers coming down in New York or anything. Do you?
No, no, not at all. I do not
No.
see that in the future.
Right. So that target is very highly financially motivated, right? So okay, so here is Unger puts it like this. Carl Unger's book, House of Bush, House of Sod. Anything I read during this episode is actually coming from that really great book. So what he says is, Carlisle has what everyone wants: the luxury of being able to make decisions, multi-billion-dollar decisions at that, with a reasonable certainty that it knows the outcomes of its decisions in advance. If
Oh.
defense, yeah, this is so crazy. If defense companies are on sale at depressed prices, for example, Carlisle knows there is a good chance that it can line up billions of dollars of military contracts for them. As a result, it can parlay its political connections into vast amounts of money.
Oh, okay.
Mm, right?
Cool.
I mean,
Cool, 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 cool,
literally
cool, you
just
guys.
cool. Literally just sitting around playing war games, and these people are not even elected. You don't vote for who's on the Carlisle
Wow,
Group,
yeah.
right? So this is a pivotal kind of business, the private equity firm. And then, like I say, Carlyle Group is special. It's an important piece of the modern puzzle that makes up the oligarchy that we enjoy today.
Oh, yes, I'm
Um,
enjoying it so much. Love it.
Love it. So before Carlisle, here's how things worked. Politicians would leave office and they went into the private sector as lawyers or lobbyists, and they were essentially renting, quote unquote, renting their access to power for $500,000 a year or so, right? So not bad work if you can get it, as they say,
Yeah.
right? But this was this was pretty standard like politician stuff. But what started happening in the early 80s is, something I want to say here too is these days, in the last few years especially, like we just were like billionaires in space, billionaires buying the post office, billionaires doing this, billionaires making island, billionaires, right? Like that's a really common thing to talk about now. We talk about it every day, what the billionaires are doing. Back in the early 80s, you didn't have that.
That's so
You didn't
true.
have that. It's so true. So, like $1 billion. I mean, it's not that it still isn't a lot of money. It's just like we have a bunch of billionaires now, in part because of this system that we're talking about right now. I mean, if not entirely because of what we're talking about right now.
Wow.
But so in the early 80s, what starts happening is a lot more money starts becoming available through government funding, right? Which just means, all that means is that starting in the 80s, you had, not only did you have the industrialists who built their empires post World War II were now peaking, like their wealth was peaking, but they were in politics themselves, and also because of Reagan's trickle down shit. Like he was pulling all of the money out of the social funding that FDR had set up. So he's pulling all of this out of the social funding and giving it to these already wealthy people. So you have this real game changer that's happening in wealth that's allowing people to amass just obscene amounts of wealth. So in the early 80s, in the Reagan Bush Thatcher White House, is an era of $1 trillion federal budgets. Like this is unheard of, back until these days. Like here's a federal budget, for a war, or to build this thing or this infrastructure or whatever it is you're up to. Prisons, I guess, were on the rise at the time. Here's $1 trillion for you to like figure out how you want to use it, right? So at this point in time, these ex-politicians started to think to themselves like, well, why are these Wall Street guys making so much more money than I am when I'm the one who knows how to handle such large sums of money?
Mm, true. Good, good point.
Good point, right? So like you're like, yeah, that should all be yours, Danny boy. I don't know what's up with that Danny boy, but that's who they all are to me today. Um, so this is coming out of Unger, and he says, as a result, through Carlisle, the most powerful figures of the Reagan-Bush era decided not to just rent their access to the White House, to the Pentagon, to the regulatory agencies, but to transform it into corporate assets, real equity in publicly held corporations, stocks worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Carlisle was on its way to perfecting the art that might be called access capitalism. To pull it off, Rubinstein, who was one of the original founding members of Carlyle Group, first assembled a critical mass of great international icons in the 80s to form a shadow government of sorts that
Oh,
gave it political clout that was unparalleled among investment firms. These politicians had forged political power out of capital, particularly in the energy and defense sectors, now could reverse the process and transform their political clout into capital.
great.
Great.
That's so great
And
for
here we
them.
are. They definitely had a great time doing it. Here's the best thing: if you go to the Group website, as I like to do, I'm like, well, what do they say about themselves? This is what they
Right.
say about themselves, right? We invest in niche opportunities created in industries heavily affected by changes in governmental policies.
What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything.
It's just you're like, oh, okay. I mean, it sounds so benign, but it's not at all.
Yeah, no.
Okay, right,
It's
but they're
really
so
like it makes me think of like how I guess it's like to be this type of person, you just have to really just be in this mindset where you're like just don't care at all what happens
yeah,
like to the greater good or whatever. It's just so wild. And it's just like, I think about how like Homo sapiens or whatever apparently like killed off all the other type of like
mm,
our types of species in order to like survive, even though it wasn't like really necessary. That's just like how they did it. And I just think about that all the
I
time
see.
because I'm just like, yeah, we just keep doing that. We just like kill each
Whoa,
other for no reason. There's this weird like brain that not even I would think the majority of people have. It's like a small group of people
yeah,
that have this mindset that just like literally ruins the entire species.
yes. I think you know what that's in that book, that occult anarchism book that you and I are
Oh
reading. I think
yeah.
they touch on that a little bit. Yeah, that I because I agree with you. I think it was maybe at some point in time like a small amount of us, and then it's like catching, and we get it at these smaller
Right.
levels, like yeah, maybe I kind of care about other people a little bit as long as I know them, but if I don't know them, I don't care, like like it maybe
Right,
doesn't
that's
affect
so
us like
real because like there's an actual like instinctual like I have to survive and like these are my means and I like need to hold on to
yeah,
some things so that I can survive. But then there's people with like unlimited means who still
yeah,
somehow also convince themselves into thinking that they need to get more or like hoard what they have. Like there's some, but I guess that's just like literally the capitalism
mm,
mindset is just like hoard, hoard,
yeah,
hoard, and like get as much as possible, and like there's no limit, you know? And
yeah,
I
I
know
mean it
like
would have,
there was like another episode, I don't remember what, but we talked about like how we used to have manifest destiny or whatever, and
hmm
how once we
hmm
like took over all the land, like all there was to take over was like, capital and resources and each other.
psychology, yeah. Uh-huh. Moving into tech now. Yeah. No, I
Mm-hmm.
think I mean, it's really true. And it does seem like they need to like hoard. And then I always like think about how stressful and scary in a big way it must be to be one of them too. Like there's got to be so much fear, like fear of the underclasses, like too, like they really would be coming for you, but then fear of each other because you look across the table and like, what? Who's looking at you? Jeff Bezos? Like that guy would put a knife in your back so fast.
I
Like
would I
like
would feel
literally.
like it's maybe more like adrenaline than fear. Like I feel
Mm,
like they
mm.
get some weird like high off of it, you know?
They look like they do. That's
Yeah.
exactly what they look like. Yeah. No, that's curious. I am curious about what it's like to like, I don't know, be one of them and be in their group. Like what is going on there?
Well,
It is a curiosity.
did you watch that Squid Game show yet?
I have not
Well, you
watched
gotta
it.
watch
No.
it. Then you'll
I know
maybe
everybody's
get
watching
some
it.
idea. That's very
Okay.
like elite class versus working class.
All
But,
right,
you
all
know.
right. I'm in. You got me. You sold me. You found. You know my button. You're like, oh, it's the be like.
Just like Squid Game.
Oh yeah. So yeah. So this is the Carlyle Group, and this is what they're doing, and they're directly controlling and or very strongly influencing the policies and regulations of the industries that they're investing in, buying out, starting up. And Carlyle Group becomes kind of famous for like they're not, and I think this is part of really contemporary capitalism too, not just in our products but in companies. Like they're not looking for longevity. Like they want to get a company and have it for a few years, have it turn out a lot of money for them, and then sell it at a high price. That's kind of what Carlyle Group likes to do. So they're not looking to build these big money making machines over time. They want a lot quick in these little games, these short term games,
Yeah.
which I think is interesting because that's a real change in mindset, also, um, from how capitalism functions. So, but of course, Callie, now you know that wherever we find the bushes,
Hmm?
we are sure to find the Saudi royals.
We are. They besties. They have those
They
best
are.
friend necklaces with the hearts that break in half.
Oh my god. They they do, only it's like pierced through their nuts.
Yeah,
Um
and also it's like a plane broken in half.
Oh, ow,
Is
burn,
that
I love
a
it.
is
It's
that
the
an edge
truth.
lord joke? Okay, that's kind of an edgy joke, but whatever. I did it. I have a podcast. I'm an edge lord.
That's now it's official. That's how you gotta do it.
Yeah.
BFF on the broken fuselage. All right,
Oh
so
god.
so all right, so here's so if this is from Unger, I'm gonna read this from Unger. So Rubenstein takes umbrage, I love that word, when asked about the firm's relationship with the Saudis, which he characterizes as virtually non-existent. They all do this. They're like, what?
Yeah,
Who?
they're like, I
No,
don't
I.
know that person.
Where's that?
Who
I
I
can't. That's where did. Is that by Iraq? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that person. What is right? Right. So, which he characterizes as virtually non-existent. The implication is that we have so much Saudi business. He says, actually, we have no investments in Saudi Arabia and never have. Maybe,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah, okay, is exactly the right
Right.
attitude.
Yeah, totally.
But a look at the many defense companies Carlyle has bought and sold shows that the investment firm has had a long and lucrative history with the Saudis. The Carlyle Group was not just the most prominent outpost for Bush and his allies in the private sector, it is also where the House of Saud and the House of Bush really did business. And that's according to Unger. So the first major transaction. See, the Carlyle Group, like so many things that the Saudi royals and the Bushes do, is it makes a cover. Just like Jim Bath is of course in this mix doing his Jim Bath stuff. But he's a cover for the what's really going on. The Carlyle's a cover. Half the charities you hear about are covers for what rich people actually do with their money, including, of course, the Clintons. And we do hear, about the Clinton Foundation. You hear about the Gates Foundation.
Mm.
It's, that stuff's real. This is truly where money is hidden in plain sight. is in these foundations, but also groups like Carlyle Group. So the first major transaction took place in 1991 when Carlyle Group helped, this is crazy, helped a Saudi multi billionaire. Now, again, like here's this word billionaire. This is 1991. This is like a Saudi Arabian multi billionaire. I don't even think Warren Buffett had $2 billion yet. I'm speculating there, but like just to be clear, like billionaires were there weren't many of them in 1991. So Carlyle helped a Saudi multi-billionaire become the largest individual shareholder in Citicorp, which is Citibank, which is what created the subprime mortgage scandal that sunk the US economy in 2008.
Cool. Wow.
Cool.
They're doing a
Which
really
is,
good job with their investments, aren't they?
aren't they doing great? And
Yes.
which is not to mention like Citicorp, Citibank has, I put it up on our Twitter today. They have a rap sheet just straight up, for those of you interested, follow us on Twitter. We put up extra things there, but like money laundering, drug dealing, Citicorp and Citibank, same thing, same company. They go on today. Right now, they are sucking us dry like the vampire that they are. And so Carlyle Group helped a Saudi multi billionaire become the largest individual stockholder. And by 1998, that investment was worth $7 billion.
Whoa.
And that's all money that they are getting scandalously sucking out of the rest of us, the rest of the world, taking people's houses, downsizing people's jobs, eating their pensions. I mean, disgusting
So
business.
evil.
It's so evil. So, what Rubenstein does then is he brings together these politicians and these business scions who are all, as it says, as Unger says, meandering around, the Reagan, Bush, Thatcher White House. And that's what he did. He brought all of these people together. And they had already done, these are Americans who had already done tens of billions of dollars worth of arms sales to the Saudis. And Rubenstein has the audacity to say that it was virtually nothing. There was virtually no connection. It's just gross.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it's not just the Saudi royals, of course. It's other rich Saudis. They all stick together, which of course is the Bin Ladens. We can never forget that. Osama bin Laden is the Gucci terrorist, and he comes from one of the richest, most, because there certainly are poor people in Saudi Arabia. Like we don't mention that on this podcast often enough, but they are there. Even though there are a lot of rich Saudis also. Okay, because they would share profits of these companies from the Saudis purchase weapons. Okay, so this is the deal. So they're bringing all these rich Saudis together, all these rich Americans together, and what happens is by getting in with these, becoming shareholders and in these companies, they're now these rich Saudis and rich, Bush family and their cohorts here in the United States, when they use their political money to buy weapons, they make money as a
Oh.
shareholder in the company.
Smart.
Smart.
They're smart. I mean, that's what like every politician does nowadays, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
God.
I mean, yes, I think so. I mean, if you look
Trendsetters.
trendsetters, if you look at their portfolios, every one of them is making, and a lot of them are invested in the prison industrial complex, and they're the ones who are legislating about who goes to prison and for how long and what the rules are there. I mean, it's disgusting when you think about it. And they have
Yes.
portfolios that reach into like big pharma that we talk about. So now, and they're in charge of legislating about health care. So, and
That's why they
regulating
get to
what
live
happens.
forever and we don't because
Yeah.
they're
We
making it so I
don't.
can't go to therapy. So
I mean, what is Kissinger? What is he doing? Why is he still alive? What is he going to be, Moses? Like, he's going to live until he's like 600 years old?
Wait,
I
is
mean,
he
my
still
God,
alive for real?
he's still alive.
I'm shocked right now.
It's terrible.
I thought that person
I
was
know.
from like prehistoric times.
I mean, he is. He's from prehistoric Britain. That's like the worst part about it. I'm
Oh
like,
my
what is,
god.
why is he talking to like every American he couldn't, he was never president because he can't run for president because he wasn't, he's a Brit. I mean, is that crazy? That's crazy. So
Yeah, I
anyway,
can't believe he's still alive. I mean, these people just live so fucking long. It's insane.
I know it's really crazy. Let's see, where am I here? Let's read something else from Unger for fun. Okay, so as a private equity firm, Carlyle's goal was not long-term profits for the companies it acquired. Rather, its strategy was to buy companies cheaply, rebuild them to the highest levels of profitability possible, and sell them within 3 to 5 years at huge margins. Thanks in a large part to Saudi contracts, its defense portfolio reaped some 2 billion in profits. This is for a company that, according to Rubenstein, had no investments in Saudi Arabia. So that's actually just repeating what I just said, but that's where I got it from. Unger. Anyway, that's the Carlyle Group. I think that's most of what I want to say about the Carlyle Group. Oh, I do want to say this. A source close to the Saudi government royals views and that says that they view investing in the Carlyle Group as a way to show their gratitude to Poppy for defending the Saudis in the Gulf War.
My jaw is on the floor.
So, I
But you
know.
can't see because this is an
They,
audio recording.
I know, right? They love Poppy Bush. They just thought he was just such a wonderful person, just such a smart person. But also, as I had talked about before, whereas W was a real charmer, like real baby kisser kind of guy. Poppy Poppy was the he was the one that had the manners. And so like if he if you can't, he didn't want anybody to be sore at him, and he was smart for this. So he would just totally fuck you over and then show back up with like, I know that stung, but let me do this for you. Let me do this for your mother. Or let me get you a fruit basket, or whatever. Like he was really good at that. And I think the Saudis were just like, isn't he amazing? Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
So all through the 80s, the Saudi royals and their associates had encouraged donations to charities that were funneling money to the Afghani freedom fighters, which became later evolved into and merged with Al Qaeda. So all of that to say, there was tons of U.S. tax money and political money and profits from the United States gross domestic product, billions of dollars worth of it funneled into Al Qaeda directly and indirectly over a course of years. Charities were also a way for the Saudis to funnel money directly to Bush related charities, or to invest in Carlyle Group funds, or to contract with Carlyle Group companies. Because now, basically, if you look at this, it's kind of like the easiest way to put this is, as like the winter holidays approach, like we'll be seeing on our Instagram, it'll be like, here's a list of businesses that are green, are businesses that are like run by a certain demographic of people, or like whatever. Here's like the businesses that you should buy gifts from instead of Amazon or Walmart, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the Carlyle Group as basically being that for evil billionaires, right? It's like, here's a list of places you should buy your stuff from.
Oh
That's
my
basic.
god, that's
Okay,
so funny.
right? Just to scale it so you understand like what they're really doing. Like this is where you don't want your friends to know that you didn't buy from this list, right?
Yeah.
So that's Carlisle Group. Um all right, let's see what else I want to get into here before we move on to some of these other things. So in all, this is from Unger. In all, a conservative estimate, 1.476 billion had made its way from the Saudis to the House of Bush its allied companies and institutions. It could safely be said that never before in history had a presidential candidate, much less a presidential candidate and his father, a former president, been so closely tied financially and personally to the ruling family of another foreign power. Never before had a president's personal fortunes and public policies been so deeply intertwined with another nation. And like, and not only another nation, but really one who was like funding like the biggest enemy of the United States. But of course, so was the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay, and let's see, one more from Unger. That might have been fine if the kingdom was another Western democracy, like, say, Great Britain or Germany or Spain. By the late 90s, it was clear that Saudi Arabia, more than any other country in the world, was responsible for the rise of Islamic fundamentalist terrorism. Now that Islamic terrorists acting on Osama's orders were killing Americans in the Khobar Towers bombing and in Kenya and Tanzania, Americans' national security was at stake. We had previously been considered a purely domestic issue. What had previously been considered a purely domestic issue for the Saudis, the House of Saud's relationship to Islamic extremists, was now a matter of America's national security. Hundreds had already been killed by Saudi funded terrorists, yet former President Bush and James Baker continued their lucrative business deals with the Saudis, apparently without asking the most fundamental questions. Because this is happening right when Bush W is about to take the White House.
Mm-hmm.
So this is right around 2000. This is, or it is 2000. It's the year leading into when he gets into office. So Al Qaeda's in full swing by October of 2000, and they attack the USS Cole, which is a U.S. naval ship. It's a guided missile destroyer that was refueling in Yemen. And Al Qaeda attacks. This is a U.S. naval ship, and they attack it. 17 U.S. Navy soldiers are killed, and 37 are injured. And again, as I always like to remind, when we hear the word injured, we're like, oh, okay, well, at least they were fine. That doesn't mean that. Like, injured is losing an eye, it's losing a leg, it's having shrapnel in your brain for the rest of your life. Like, this is not right. This isn't, you didn't fall down and go boom, you got bombed. Just saying.
Yes.
Yemen at the time was already fighting against Al Qaeda. There were other people fighting against Al Qaeda because, as we talked about in the last episode, Al Qaeda technically is a free floating, it's sovereign. It doesn't belong to any country. It doesn't, even though it's like shielded by the Taliban, and it's given money by, and probably other governments, also during that time and even now, Al Qaeda is still, Al Qaeda is still out there, and they're more legitimate in some ways than ever, which maybe we'll talk about at some other point in time. But even if they're shielded by certain places, they have friends in high places, so to speak. They don't necessarily have your interests in mind. It's like a house guest who's like, look, you either let me eat your veganese, or I like give all your stuff away to the neighbor. You choose, right? So
the veganese, I'm dead.
Right. So, but Yemen is already fighting against Al Qaeda alongside Uzbekistan and the Philippines. These are all countries that are like, we have to do something, even if like U.S. and Saudi Arabia doesn't want to get involved. We have to do something. And at this point in time, a man named Richard Clark, who kind of cracks me up, but Richard Clark at the time is the U.S. Czar of Counterterrorism. And he was concerned and had been concerned for a long time. He had been briefing the Clinton administration for a long time on Al Qaeda. And there's a great deal of evidence to show that the Clinton administration did make efforts to pull back U.S. support of Al Qaeda in a variety of ways. So they were certainly, that administration was certainly less amenable to Al Qaeda than the administration that follows it,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But at the same time, they weren't doing enough and maybe couldn't. I mean, like, I'm not sticking up for the Clintons ever, but like, I don't know what it's like to be stuck between two bushes. You know what I mean?
Oh my
Like, I
god,
don't
that's
know.
so funny. But then I guess
Right?
it's like I don't know. I feel like we talked about this in one of the earlier Bush episodes too, but about how it's kind of just like a fake gap anyways because they were so like
Yeah.
in each other's shit. So
Yeah. I mean, for sure. It's kind of, it's like you can have dealings with people that you don't agree on everything, and you might go your own way on some things, like whatever. Like, well, my friend that I'm in a band with doesn't like this other band, but I go to all their shows, or whatever. Like, it's kind of like that, but you're still like in a band with them and you're still together with them. And that's, anyway, scaling it back, that's the Clinton Bush relationship. You're still in a band together, guys. Say what you want.
that's so funny.
So Richard Clark he's the czar, was the czar of counterterrorism, and he had been keeping Bush or the Clinton administration apprised of it. And right at the end of 2000, because remember this bombing in Yemen happens in October of 2000. And it's not like these Al Qaeda guys are dumb. Like, they know regime change is coming in the United States. Like, they get the timing on this, and they get the where they're bombing. Yemen is a target because Yemen's fighting them, right? Like, they
Mm-hmm.
get all this stuff. They're really not these like guys who are like, we threw a bunch of rocks at it or whatever, which is kind of how, like, right? But I mean, like, that's kind of how in the United States we've been taught to think of Al Qaeda, and it's like, I don't think that clearly is not true. Like,
Right. Seriously.
they're seriously, like, these are really, like, pretty genius terrorists. Sorry, but they are. So, like, they understood all of that. And so anyway, by December of 2000, Clark had prepared a comprehensive plan to fight Al Qaeda, and he had presented it to the Clinton administration. But this is December. Like, Billy and Al are leaving office in like a few weeks. Maybe Al's going to become, or no, they already even know Al's not president. Like, at this point in time, um, we already know that, or it's happening right at the same time, I guess, because it's 6 weeks after the October attack. It's 6 weeks later that the Supreme Court stops the recount in Florida, and we know Bush is going to be the president. So, for all I know, this briefing happened on the same day. So, at any rate, it's the end of the Clinton administration, and Clark is saying, "Here's my plan. Here's how you can fight Al Qaeda." But then that happens. The Supreme Court stops it. And so now W is the incoming president. So at that point in time, I mean, like, that's what they call, I think that's what a lame duck president is. It's like, it's over. We're out of here.
Right.
Like, this is
Yes.
right. Like,
Yeah.
we're basically just like sweeping out the pantry at
Coasting
this
for the
point.
rest of the
Yeah,
time.
right. Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, exactly. There's nothing left to be done. Sign a few things here and there. But other than that, we're on our way out. So, and then you also have, like, this is a fact, no matter what party is going in or out of the White House, like, obviously, if Gore had won that election, there would have been a more seamless transition because he would have been there for 8 years. He would have known all of those people. He would have been apprised of all of these different things that were going on. But which is true, like, if a Republican were to get into the White House after W, there would be a more seamless transition, right? Just because somebody's there, it's already been there for 8 years. Like, you had that when Poppy Bush took his one term as president. He could do a lot because he'd already been in the White House for 8 years. Anyway,
Right.
right. So here's this. Now this White House is turning over, though, to this whole new team. And apparently these are very difficult transitions for the White House to make anytime you're turning it over to an entirely new team of people, right? So, um, basically Clark gives this proposal for how to go after Al Qaeda, basically into a black hole, right? But nonetheless, he persists, And he he in January of 2001, when Bush comes into office, this is one of the first things that happens. Is Richard Clark he talks to Bush and Cheney and Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice and the National Security Advisor, which is Sandy Berger, who had actually been the National Security Advisor under Clinton. So he's heard this before for a long time. So the National Security Advisor, you'd think that's a big deal, has known for a long time that Al Qaeda is a big problem. So so he goes, but Richard Clark tells these Rice, Powell, Bush, Cheney, Sandy Berger, these really important people, right? He's telling them, he's like, look, an Al Qaeda attack on U.S. soil is imminent. Like this will happen, and it's going to happen soon, right? And so, and there would already, he said, there's already sleeper cells here. Like they're here. Like this is happening. Red light, red light. Like I don't know how much more I can explain this to you. They're here. They're trained. This is going down, right? And here's what we need to do. So Clark had his plan to go after Al Qaeda, and he explained it to them in great detail. One of the most significant parts, and here is where the Bush White House is like, "Well, thanks for coming by." It's like because he says you have to stop funding them and anyone else who's funding them. And Bush is like, "Oh, right, all right, Dickie."
Right.
Dickie Clark. Seemed like a good guy, seemed like a bang up guy, but no can do.
Not
Right? I mean,
happening.
like, not happening. And so this is actually, just to skip ahead a little bit here, Richard Clark did resign in February of 2003, which is Bush White House starts bombing Iraq in first Afghanistan and then Iraq in May of 2003. So this is a few months before that shit show starts. And Richard Clark resigns, and he says, this is his quote: "I already don't miss it. You know that feeling you get when you finally stop banging your head against a wall?"
Oh. Wow,
That's
amazing.
amazing, right? Because I mean, that's Richard Clark. He was the counterterrorism czar. He's the one that like this shit is coming. This shit is gonna happen, and then he's like, you know what? Fuck this. Fuck it. Fuck all of you. Like I
Fuck
can't
you,
keep doing
fuck
this.
you, fuck you, you're cool, I'm out.
Right, totally. It's like I can't keep doing this, but I'll always hear those words in my head now. I already don't miss it.
Wow, yeah,
So
that's very iconic. That's an iconic way to quit a job.
it is. It totally is. So in fact, there were many warnings incoming to the entire administration that something was going to happen. Even CIA Director George Tenet, who's a total dick, he testified in Congress that Osama bin Laden specifically was a major and immediate threat. George Tenet. So, like, I'm going to read something from Unger about that. So this is all right. On January 30th, 2001, a bipartisan commission led by former Senators Gary Hart and Warren Rudman warned Congress that a devastating terrorist attack on U.S. soil could be imminent. In the report, 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans unanimously approved 50 recommendations in hopes of addressing the Commission's assessment that the combination of unconventional weapons, proliferation with the persistence of international terrorism will end the relative invulnerability of the U.S. homeland to catastrophic attack. Not long after the Commission's report was released on February 7th, this is 2001, CIA Director George Tenet testified in Congress that Osama bin Laden and his global network of lieutenants and associates remain the most immediate and serious threat to American security. Nevertheless, even with CIA support, the recommendations of the Hart-Rudman Commission didn't get far. As Hart later lamented, frankly, the White House shut it down. The president said, "Please wait. We're going to turn this over to the vice president, Dick Cheney. And
Mm.
we believe this is great. We believe FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is
Oh, God.
competent is competent to coordinate this effort. And so Congress moved on to other things like tax cuts. FEMA.
Okay, can I just I just need to say something, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to say it. And I'm prepared to
Mm-hmm.
be wrong. Let me give a little backstory.
Okay.
I did try to do some research into 9/11, and most of it was stuff I put down because it was all like just seemingly really racist towards Middle Eastern people. Um,
Uh-huh.
I am just gonna. I'm like afraid to say it because people are gonna listen to this, and I don't want everybody to think I'm crazy. Let me phrase it as a question.
Okay.
How do we know that America didn't make Al Qaeda?
Right. Well,
Is that where you're getting to?
not specifically because
Okay.
I don't because of the same reasons that you're kind of like I don't know. I
Okay,
really don't know,
I'll
but I
say more
mean,
then.
go ahead.
Because basically it seems almost like they created this perfect scapegoat that also they're like refusing to look into.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much all the stuff that I mean, I'm literally like I don't know. I have this podcast, I talk a lot, but I'm not going to say that I'm like an expert on the topic. But
Mm-hmm.
when I was looking into it, it just seems like there's this narrative that like Al Qaeda was born in the jails of Egypt from like these Middle Eastern Muslim men who were like so appalled at the Western woman. Like they talked a lot about this
Yeah.
one guy who had like gone to college in America, like in Colorado, and was like, skirts. This makes me so filled with hatred. I'm gonna become a terrorist now. To me, I'm just like, I don't really fucking buy it, honestly,
Right.
because I feel like it simultaneously creates this racist narrative
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
these ignorant Middle Eastern people would be so appalled by our liberated woman, American woman, that they would attack us. And then, so first of
Yeah.
all, racist. Second of all, kind of puts this myth in a higher standing that like women in America have freedoms. Of course, white women and certain women have more freedoms than other women, but ultimately like women are still oppressed in this country. They are like not the
Uh-huh.
most oppressed by any means, but like it's still not good. So just this whole idea that like it just seems like too perfect. Like it simultaneously makes the scapegoat for all this fuckery
Mm-hmm.
and then also kind of makes it so that it's like when you're getting into this like real racism towards Middle Eastern people that was like ramping up in the 90s and then in like the early 2000s was like so bad. Like if you watch like
Mm-hmm.
South Park. You know, South Park's a show that's been on like
Mm-hmm.
for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And
More. Yeah.
there are seasons where it's just so Islamophobic and racist to Middle Eastern people
Mm.
specifically that I'm just like, oh yeah, there was really that big cultural moment where it was like so socially acceptable to do this, to treat people like this racism, and it's because
Mm-hmm.
of this like perfect little group that just sprang together called Al Qaeda that just like happened to like like how the fuck do they have sleeper cells in the US? Like when you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
like Russia having sleeper cells in the US, a country with like a lot of means, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
okay, maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I would believe more, but like I'm sorry, but I'm sorry for everybody that like is going to not think I am a well person anymore after saying this. But like I'm just really not buying it. Like to me it's just like seems too fishy. And then when you're just saying all this stuff about how they had all this information they didn't follow up, and I'm just like, yeah, that's because
Yeah.
phone calls coming from like inside the house. Like George Bush has two cell phones, and one is the Al Qaeda hotline, and like
I
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's completely unhinged at all. I mean, like
Thank
I
you.
don't
This is why
feel,
you are my
yeah.
friend.
I mean, I don't feel like anyone can exactly say, where exactly, because I think it's coming out of, I think Al Qaeda's formed like out of the MAC, which was, um, directly and indirectly funded by the United States and Saudi Arabia, in particular the Bush family, and it's coming out of other things that are definitely being funded by deep American interests. So if they're not directly creating the concept of Al Qaeda and directly involved in it, which I'm not saying that they're not, but even if they're not, they are certainly like they're like first or second in line for why it exists.
Yeah, I guess here's my part two as well. Like,
Hmm.
how do like Al Qaeda and ISIS? Why are those two separate entities?
Oh,
Like,
right,
they're not the same thing, and I think ISIS seems way more rooted in like the Arab Spring and actual
right.
uprisings versus Al Qaeda that is apparently born because somebody was like pissed that American women wear skirts or whatever. And I like wish I was being really reductive, but like I
You're not though.
began listening to like multiple very highly regarded books on the topic before I was like, this literally sounds so fucking made up racist to me that I cannot
Mm-hmm.
take this as a source. But then I started thinking more about like, why is this the fucking story? It's literally so stupid and makes no sense and reduces these men to like to fools, you know?
To
And like,
fools living
how
in
did these,
caves, like it's always
yeah,
been
it's literally
ridiculous.
that.
Yeah,
So it's like, how are you going to be that? And then also all these other things that you're saying they are,
right.
which are like these fucking geniuses
Masterminds.
who, yeah, infiltrated America and our planes and caused all this mayhem, but also
Mm-hmm.
they're like these fucking idiots who don't have any resources. Like, it can't be both. I'm just not
Right.
buying it. So, in
Right.
conclusion, Al Qaeda is fake. I just
Well, and
don't
I mean,
think it. Yeah, that's what I think.
yeah, and I mean, I think there's something to that, and like to kind of throw this in there too with what you're saying is in it was January of 2013. Obama was president of the United States, and the HSBC, which is a banking corporation, it's an international banking corporation, stands for Hong Kong Singapore Banking Corporation, but being an international bank, they had their hand in part of what happened here with the subprime mortgages in the United States. They have their hand in everything around the world because they're international. They're part of the LIBOR ratio. So they are one of the 16 banks that make up every single day how much money is actually worth, because that changes every day, which that's its whole own story. But at any rate, HSBC got in trouble for laundering $800 million, I think, in drug money. And they were busted by the Obama administration. And Barack Obama came out and he said, they fined them for doing this. But somebody else wanted to know. So HSBC, in their books, they have a line item where they gave $1 billion or something. Maybe it was 800 billion. I might have those numbers mixed up, but it was a large sum of money that on their books they donated to Al Qaeda. This is in 2013. So, like, Al Qaeda is just kind of another organization at this point in time that one of our international banks that contributes every single day to how much money is worth, they put it in their books when they give Al Qaeda money. And Barack
This is
Obama
fucking
said,
psycho.
it's fucking psycho. And he said, because somebody asked him about it, they're donating money to Al Qaeda. And Barack Obama kind of laughed and he said, you know, if we take out HSBC, we collapse the global economy. He's like, what do you want me to
Barack
do? Was
Obama's like,
basically
all you fucking idiots are too stupid to
totally,
understand.
totally. He's like, who lives in caves and doesn't understand fuck all? You.
Ew!
That's basically what
Stop.
he
Oh my god, that's so
said.
funny.
Right. So, like, what you're saying is not unhinged at all.
Thank
They are
you.
apparently a legitimate organization that our international banks can put in their books and write off on their whatever and put and just be like, yeah, we gave a bunch of money to you got to give it to the terrorists, you know.
Oh
So
my
yeah,
god.
mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm behind you, Callie,
I
and
literally
all of
cannot believe that people are patriotic. Like
I.
it's a
What the
joke.
hell is that
It's a
all
joke.
about? I know. The flag gives me screaming fucking nightmares. Like anytime I'm like, ah!
Oh my god.
Why are you wearing that?
I'm just like,
I mean, unless it's like a
really?
drag show,
Okay,
and then
yes,
it's okay.
exactly. If you're gonna if it's a performance piece that you're gonna set on fire.
Something, or you're gonna make love to it on the duvet on stage. Cool.
Yes, beautiful. Okay, well, thank
um,
you for letting me
yeah.
say that theory. But
No, I'm glad you did. It deserves its place in this conversation. Yeah,
well,
so the Bush administration says we're going to let FEMA handle this, which
oh my god, I
again,
forgot to
but
even say how dumb I think that is. So let it be
it's
said.
terrible.
Fuck
Yeah, and
FEMA.
fuck FEMA. And so like it also needs to be said that this is happening, this is pre 9/11. This is happening at a time when FEMA is new. I didn't look up what year FEMA got started. But you didn't have like FEMA's new. So FEMA, I need to really look into where FEMA came from because it seems pretty clear that it's a Bush operation in some way, especially like after Hurricane Katrina, like the way they acted,
Oh my
doing a
god.
bang up job, Brownie. Like, I mean, they were all about like FEMA. The Bush family loves FEMA. So, and it was mentioned in an old X Files episode, like this, like the deep throat guy or whatever. He's
Oh
dark in a
yeah.
hallway, and
Yes.
he's like he looks into the camera and he like warns Fox Mulder, but it's a straight on into the camera. He says very slowly, "FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency." In that way you're like, why is this
Oh
seem
my
like
god,
this?
that just
Like,
really. This is spooky Halloween town because that just made me feel scared. That was scarier than any scary movie I've seen this year. Especially because I received $0 from FEMA after
of course.
whatever. Fucking Ida. I didn't even get the 500 or whatever, so.
So there you go. Hey, you know what though? They would have sued you back for it anyway.
Yo,
That's how they do that.
literally.
Literally,
Literally.
literally. They'll come
Ugh.
for you 10 years later and tell you need receipts that you don't fucking have. And otherwise, they'll sue you. And I know people personally who have their wages garnished to this day from a hurricane that happened 16 years ago. So just saying.
Super cool,
That's
FEMA. You're
super
doing
cool,
such
FEMA.
a good job
Bang
being
up job.
good at your
That's what
job.
you're good at your job.
Dickholes.
So, other indications that Al Qaeda was coming for us that were happening in early 2001. This is my favorite. Okay, like her name is Peggy Chevret, and I have already prayed a couple of times that in my next life, that's my name, Peggy Chevret. Is
That
that
is a
like?
beautiful name.
I love it so much. It's the most American thing I've ever heard. Peggy Chevret. So, but Peggy Chevette was the manager of a place called Jet Tech Flight School in Phoenix. And she had notified the FAA several times. She was very upset about some of the things that were going on at this flight tech school because this is what was happening. This is where these sleeper cells were hidden in plain sight in the United States, were at these
Oh.
flight schools, right? Because they were being trained for the
Yes,
planes.
for nine
Yes,
11.
for 9/11. And so Peggy
Mm.
Chevret, the world's greatest American with the world's greatest American name, was a manager at this place. And she, on numerous occasions, she notified the FAA and she specifically spoke of a man named Hani Hanjour. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was a Saudi Arabian man, or I'm sorry, he was Afghani, and she had notified the FAA on numerous occasions that he lacked the necessary flying skills for the license that he held. Okay, now
Mm.
which he had obtained his license in 1999, so this is 2001, and Peggy's freaking out. She's like, I don't understand why he has this license specifically. Now this is chilling. you want to know what specifically the man cannot do? He cannot land a plane, but he has a pilot's license. He can't land a plane. So, what flight does he wind up flying? Flight 77. Those fuckers didn't need to land planes. They weren't training to survive.
Okay. I also have feelings and opinions about these boys that were trained.
Mm-hmm.
From what I had understood, is they were so shitty at flying they couldn't even fly the fucking plane. They couldn't do jack shit behind the plane. They couldn't even do anything. They wouldn't have been able to chart a course on the plane. So that's where shit gets kind of confusing to me. Because, like, yes, I would totally believe they're just training people to, like... Here's the thing, though, Michelle. If you can't land the plane, you probably can't do a lot of other shit on the plane either. It's not like everything else is, like, smooth sailing besides landing the plane, you know?
Well, I wish we could talk to Peggy Chevette and ask her what the fuck else this guy couldn't do, right? But she was upset. She was upset enough to call several times. She probably had inklings about other things also. You know what I mean? She probably was like, this guy, everything about this is bad. And anyway, the FAA inspected him and didn't do anything. So here's a guy who we know for sure at least one thing he can't do is land a plane, and the FAA is not taking his license back. So also now here I want to just throw something else in that I find interesting. It has probably no meaning whatsoever, but I also just find it interesting that the thing that locked up W when he was flying as a pilot was he became unable to land a plane. And so, like, it's not connected in any way, I guess, but it's just one of those things that I think Freud would say,
Yes,
so I thought I'd throw it in there. So also around this time, so in Afghanistan, in Kandahar, Osama bin Laden's son is getting married, and despite supposedly being disavowed by the whole family, he was in fact at the wedding with the family, so which had been something we had questioned last time. It was in Afghanistan though, not in Saudi Arabia, which supposedly at this time, everyone had disavowed him. He had his citizenship taken. He wasn't allowed around anybody, but he was at the wedding. And it is said also that supposedly, and this is the part that's funny to me, supposedly he read a poem that people speculate was actually about the bombing of the USS Cole.
What?
Yeah, it's not that long. I can read it.
Please, God, please read it.
Okay. This is Osama bin Laden's poem that he read at his son's wedding in February
I love Secret Antenna. Secret Antenna is the best podcast ever. Okay, go ahead.
Your brothers in the east prepared their mounts, and Kubal has prepared itself, and the battle camels are ready to go. A destroyer, even the brave fear its might. It inspires horror in the harbor and in the open sea. She goes into the waves flanked by arrogance, haughtiness, and fake might. To her doom she progresses slowly, clothed in a huge illusion. Awaiting her is a dinghy bobbing in the waves, disappearing and reappearing in view. So.
Wow. Wow. He fits in really well with these other chaotic men, I think. That's just some fucking chaotic shit to do.
Can you imagine you're writing, you'd be like, okay, Dad.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, thanks, Dad. Wow.
Okay, God. All right, Dad. Would you get the mic from him? Is he drunk? Is everything about terrorism for you, Dad?
Oh my God, that's so funny. I don't know why it weirdly makes me think too of the like Barbara Bush fake letter she wrote after the JFK assassination. I'm just like, you guys are birds of a feather.
It's exactly what I thought of when I read this poem. It's exactly. I was like, why did they do this?
That's
what
so
is up
funny.
with these fucking people?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I gotta say though, Osama bin Laden's a much better writer than Barbara Bush.
Oh my God, yes. That was, I I mean, I would love to hear it in the original language. I'm sure it sounds
In
beautiful.
Dari, yeah. Right. I don't know. I don't know. Well, but anyway, so that's what they say, that that was about the USS Cole, which would happen, which
Well,
happened a few months
snaps
prior.
from me. Here's my snaps
Yeah.
applause.
Snaps, snaps. Way to go, Osama. You got us. You got us. So so then also in March of 2001, the Italian government called W personally and said had been wiretapping two Al Qaeda agents in Milan, and they had caught them. They had a recording of them talking about forging documents for the two brothers going to the U.S. So the Italian government warned W directly that this was happening. Let's see. I have page 230 in Unger. I wanted to read this. Okay, on April 18th, this is 2001 also, U.S. Airlines got a memo from the FFA warning that they should demonstrate a high degree of alertness because Middle Eastern terrorists might try to hijack or blow up an American plane. But apparently during this time, and this would also really be show a lot of it's very Bush like, and it's very Bush family like, and it's very Al Qaeda like. These are, I mean, how I don't know if you want to call the Bush family terrorists. I think that that's reasonable, but at any rate, like what they have in common also with Al Qaeda and with Osama bin Laden, they're all spies. They're all spies. They
Mm-hmm.
all know they know spycraft. Like this isn't. These people are all. They're all the same. Birds of a feather, just like what you're saying. So like during this time, during 2000, 2001, like apparently there were so many threats against the bombing of airplanes that like everybody was just pretty numb to them. Like they were just totally regular. Like there were so many you couldn't. Everybody was like, "Oh, another bomb threat against a plane." Okay, like nobody
Wow,
thought
that's
about it. Yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy, but it's also crazy like a fox, right?
Right. Crazy
Right.
like a
Very
bush.
crazy like a Bush or an Osama bin Laden. So either, I mean, like, what a great way to like disarm your opponent's alert system is to overload it well before you plan to attack. It's just smart. So there's that. Right. Okay, now here's some fun stuff that happened. So all of this is going on. But shortly before, Italy has called them and been like, "Hey, look, this is happening." All of their own people, George Tennant, Richard Clark, everyone's warning them. Peggy Chevrette, among others. She's not the only one saying that there's issues. Like you have these pilots, you have these people who have licenses, and it's weird. It's not right. All of these things going on, and so, but during this period of time the Bush administration decides to give. This is really interesting because another thing the Bush administration had said to Richard Clark when he said, "Here's how you can attack Al Qaeda, and here's my plan to get rid of Al Qaeda." One of the things that the Bush, Condoleezza Rice in particular, had said is she had said, well, we don't like your plan because we have to consider the Taliban and Al Qaeda as a unit. We have to see them as a system since they're hiding Al Qaeda. So your plan just wants to attack Al Qaeda, which he was probably right. I mean, he was the counterterrorism czar, and he probably knew what he was talking about, and especially since Al Qaeda was sovereign. And so he probably had plans to like put a wedge between the Taliban and Al Qaeda, right? Which, I mean, I'm speculating there, but that's what I would think. And so that was probably in his plan. And the Bush administration said, no, we have to consider them a unit. So despite having said that 2 or 3 months before this, they gave $43 million to the Taliban because of its policies against growing opium. Because the Taliban agreed with the Bushes on the global drug war. Because guess who the only fucking drug dealers in the world are going to be? The Bushes.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
You're not the drug dealer. We're the fucking drug dealers. Right? So, like, they like the Taliban because we talked about that before. The Taliban was the one lowering poppy production lowering the opium production in Afghanistan. That's why Afghani people approved of the Taliban, even if they didn't approve of the Taliban. They're like, yeah, I don't agree with anything they say, except, they're going to take my neighborhoods back from like the drug lords or whatever, right? So, anyway, the Bush family gives them $43 million. This is months before the towers go down. So like not only so that happens, and this columnist named Robert Shear wrote in the Los Angeles Times. He wrote, "Enslave your girls and women, harbor anti-U.S. terrorists, destroy every vestige of civilization in your homeland, and the Bush administration will embrace you." He wrote. All that matters is that you line up as an ally in the drug war, the only international cause that this nation still takes seriously. Never mind that Osama bin Laden still operates the leading anti American terror operation in his base in Afghanistan, from which, among other crimes, he launched 2 bloody attacks on American embassies in Africa in 1998. So, right. Anyway,
Mm.
that's happening. One other thing that also happens is in June of 2001, the United States did this Visa Express program all of a sudden with Saudi Arabia, which I guess they waived visas for like 28 countries, most of them in Western Europe. So it's not totally unheard of that they do this, but they did this for Saudi Arabia, which people were like, wait a minute, that's probably like not a very good idea. But what it does is it's basically for convenience. Like they said these really funny things about it. Like people don't have to wait in line out in the sun to get their visa to go to the United States. So with the Visa Express program, you don't have to show up in person to get a visa to go to the United States. So so in June of 2001, the United States extended this to Saudi Arabia. So like the people like at the consulate or where you get your visa, they would look at paperwork and they had no idea if who was on the paperwork is who was getting the visa. They didn't. There was no checking. It was just it was just a mark on a
Cool.
box, right? So apparently 3 out of the 11 hijackers, I think there's 11 hijackers in the end, 3 of them came into the country through the Visa Express program. Just saying. I mean, not that there weren't already a whole bunch of
Convenient
them here.
timing.
Convenient timing. So like it's kind of like most of them were here, I think already, in the sleeper cells being trained, to whatever degree to fly planes. And they just had a few left that needed to get in, and it sounds to me like the Bush administration was like, let us take care of that for you. That's what it sounds like to me. I don't know,
Yeah, it sounds like
whatever.
that to me too.
Right. So, I mean, at that point, that takes us right up to, September 11, 2001. So, I mean, and whatever happened there, I can tell you this. This is nuts. But after the towers went down, the air was frozen. Like there was no, you couldn't fly any planes, commercial or international, domestic, anything. I mean, like even like, there were people who needed, one story in particular, of somebody who like their kidney was coming. Like you only have like 6 hours with it from like a kidney, taking it from a donor to like or whatever, it was a liver or something,
Yeah.
from a donor to the person that's going to get it. These people were not allowed to fly. You see, right? That's how serious
Wow.
this was.
Yeah.
Like, I can't get your heart from Minnesota to LA because there's been a terrorist attack. I'm sorry. Like that was shit that was going on that day. Nobody could fly. Cali except, and this is like not nobody's guessing on this. This is what fucking went down. The only people who were flying that day were Saudi royals and bin Ladens. That
Like in
fucking happened
domestically, or was it?
domestically. So Bandar, all right. So this guy, let me make sure I get his name right. It's a long one. So Prince Bandar bin Sultan bin Abdul Aziz. Now this is the grandson of Abdul Aziz, who made the original sweetheart deal with FDR in the Suez Canal for oil for securities in
Mm-hmm.
1945. Okay, this is his grandson. So he's a he's an ambassador to the United States from Saudi Arabia, and on later that day, between September 11th and I think September 14th, maybe the 13th, over the course of the next few days, he fly where nobody can fly. There is no air zone for anyone over the United States, right? Or in or out or over it domestically. No planes in the air, except he somehow manages to move 140 Saudis to Florida so he can put them on planes out of the fucking country.
What?
Yes. So like here I'm going to
That
read
doesn't
this
make
from
any
Unger. This
sense.
It's fucking crazy. It makes me want to cry. It makes me so frustrated and angry. So, like, here's what's in Unger. So, Bandar went to work immediately. If any foreign official had the clout to pull strings at the White House in the midst of a grave national security crisis, it was he, a senior member of the Washington Diplomatic Corps. Bandar had played racquetball with Secretary of State Colin Powell in the late 70s. He had run covert operations for the late CIA Director Bill Casey that were so hush hush they were kept secret even from President Ronald Reagan. He was the man who had stashed away 30 locked attache cases that held some of the deepest secrets of the intelligence world, and for 2 decades, Bandar had built an intimate personal relationship with the Bush family that went far beyond a mere political friendship. So,
They had best friendship necklaces.
they did totally. Oh
No,
my
I'm
God.
making a joke because if I don't laugh, what else are you gonna do? You know,
Yeah, right.
that's just
It's
crazy.
crazy. It's crazy. So, shortly after the attack, the president made a speech and he said, "We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed this act and those who harbor them." But as you know, I mean, that
Which
vow
is
doesn't apply to,
you, yeah.
which is you and Saudi Arabia. And it doesn't apply to Saudi Arabia, who
Right.
bears more responsibility maybe than anyone except the Bushes. Um, but
Woo!
as Richard Clarke had once said, he said that was the former, at the time, he was the czar of counterterrorism. And he kind of shrugged because people were mad about the Saudi Arabia stuff. And he said, he's like, look, we do actually have to work with what we have in Saudi Arabia because I can guarantee you one thing, the replacement would be worse. And basically, in a way, he's just saying like their replacement wouldn't have the same French relationships with the United States politicians as the royals do. So I found that interesting enough
Which
to like
is
bring up.
worse for who?
I I know. I mean, who this is 20 years ago too. I don't know if Richard Clarke agrees with himself now, or not. There's no way to know that. But at the time when people asked him about it, he was like, "Look, the alternative's actually worse, believe it or not," was basically his attitude. So,
Huh.
um right. But as Unger points out in his book, it's not a real alliance, at least not at a national level, because if it were, the U.S. would have gotten help from the Saudis after the USS Cole bombing to suss out extremists and still been able to maintain a relationship. Like an alliance, right? I mean, if somebody right, like if you and I have some kind of drug house alliance or something, and somebody from my ranks like steals your car or something, and you call me up, like if we're going to continue to have alliance, I'm going to turn that person over to you, right? I'm going to be like, it was Bob and fuck him, right? I mean, that's what Unger's like getting at there. It's like in a real alliance, you can do that. So I'm going to read one more thing from Unger, and then, yeah, I don't know, we can just rap about 9/11 if you want. So, all right, this is the one last thing I'm going to read from this book to you tonight, I think. Oh, you know what? Here, I'm going to do this. It was on September 13th that Bandar went to the White House, and he and Bush W discussed how they would work together in the war on terror. Wait, this is freaking crazy. Hang on, let me get back to it because this is the thing I really want to read.
Yes.
So, okay. So Bush said that the United States would hand over any captured Al Qaeda operatives to the Saudis if they would not cooperate. The implication was clear. The Saudis could use any means necessary, including torture, to get the suspects to talk. But the larger point went unspoken. The two men were scions of the most powerful dynasties in the world. The Bush family and its close associates included two presidents of the United States, former Secretary of State Jim Baker, who was a powerful figure in four presidential administrations. James Baker was so powerful; it's so true. Um, the Republican Party, and much more. As for Bandar, his family effectively was the government of Saudi Arabia, the most powerful country in the Arab world. They had hundreds of billions of dollars and the biggest oil reserves in the world. My God. The relationship was unprecedented. Not just business partners and personal friends, the Bushes and the Saudis had pulled off elaborate covert operations and gone to war together. They had shared secrets that involved unimaginable personal wealth, spectacular military might, the richest energy resources in the world, and the most odious crimes imaginable. They had been involved in the Iran Contra scandal and in secret U.S. aid to Afghanistan war and gave birth to Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden's their baby. Along with
Oh.
then Vice President Bush, the Saudis had joined the United States in supporting the brutal Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein for 7 full years after knowing that he had used weapons of mass destruction. So, anyway,
WMDs.
WMDs. So, yeah, that's the story there.
Well, that's wild. Okay, I guess I will say the following things.
Hmm. Okay.
Okay. One, I feel that there is more direct American involvement in 9/11 than maybe what has already been said today. Because it's like really hard to
Hmm.
find, cuz what I respect and what I like about us in this podcast is we're just like we're saying things, and you've been doing all these ones. You're saying things that are like, proven with documents and things, and there's like a
Hmm.
paper trail, at least in the very littlest. But what I'm saying doesn't have those things. So preface with
Yep.
that, it's definitely like conjecture, etc. But that's just
Yep.
like what I feel and what makes sense to me.
Hmm.
Is that it's way more, I guess, because the way that all of our lives changed after 9/11, it's like,
Mm.
yes, of course, disaster capitalism
Hmm.
is that's the ultimate moment to make those changes. But then it's also just like knowing that these change, and basically I'm talking about like surveillance. And it's just like
Yes.
knowing that what you already said and what we already know is it's like this family is like data mining family, like information
Hmm.
gathering family, like
Hmm.
CIA, all these things. It's just like information gathering. And then it's just like this perfect moment where it's like you literally turn the culture turns into spying on itself. Because this is also before like
Yeah.
this is
Hmm.
before Facebook was even a twinkle in Mark Zuckerberg's eye. It's like this is the beginning of like a real surveillance state, which we all know.
Yes. Yeah.
So for that reason, and just all these things lining up with him being in office is happening right after he gets in office, who's there, etc., etc. What I found in my looking into like 9/11 specifically and Al Qaeda, obviously I think that like I am suspicious of what the narrative is about like how Al Qaeda was came about. I
Mhm.
think it's really
Mhm.
fishy, and I think it's just too kind of perfect of a scapegoat, and it led to this too kind of when I it's too like it's the worst thing. Like only an event like this could really nationalize everybody in this way that not only like
Mhm.
creates this like we love America vibe, but also
Mhm.
creates this willingness to just like allow ourselves to be like surveilled in the
Yeah.
concept of safety against this like perfect other they've created that is like so foreign and like hates us. It really also
Mhm.
victimized us. Like it made
Mm.
Americans feel like these little like weakling victims that were being like picked on because we're so like liberated and great. So all of that is
Right.
bullshit. Like it's obviously all bullshit. Also like I'm not going to go like crazy into 9/11 because like I just don't have there's plenty of resources, and also it's like when you look into stuff
It's true.
like this specifically, this topic, it's like
Mhm.
really hard. It just gets like really confusing, which I think is by design. Oh
Mhm.
yeah, we also didn't talk about that journalist, did we? That Chris Hayes or
What?
whatever.
Oh no, we didn't.
Yeah,
I can
so
read that
right,
tweet.
this reminds me of this thing that you already told me, which was go ahead.
Right. Okay, so this is Chris Hayes, who is currently an anchor on MSNBC, but he's a MSNBC. He's a liberal dude that's been around for a while, and he tweeted this out in August of 1920. So like just like right before the 19th anniversary of 9/11, and he says, "I was tangentially involved in the great left truther wars during the first Bush term." Which was an ultimately successful and fairly organic effort to isolate a faction of the political coalition that had fallen down an insane conspiracy rabbit hole. It can be done. So what he's talking about is he was himself a Pied Piper for pulling leftists, not liberals, right, but leftists,
Exactly.
uh, off track down a truther rabbit hole on purpose so that they could later be discredited.
Right. And
He's part of that.
it's wild that he calls the investigation into 9/11 a conspiracy theory when it's like
Yes.
9/11 is the conspiracy, guys. Like it's
Yes.
like come on. Like if you watch like one common theme I found is basically just like the story that we were told is so fucking untrue. Literally, and I hate,
Completely.
and it's like, it's very obvious why like jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams became this like meme against like people that were just questioning the reality of this.
Hmm.
But here's the fucking thing is it doesn't. Like that's real. That's very real. And like the way that the buildings fell down does not make scientific mathematical sense with how the planes crashed into the building. Period. Like
Well, and
that's
like
just
you
it.
and you know me about Building 7. That's the one that gets me, and especially since
Yeah.
like I have to look again, but I think they had the same owner or something like that. And I'm like,
Oh,
oh
I
come
mean, I don't
on.
even. Yeah,
I
it's
don't.
just very sus, and it reminds me like of the Waco thing,
Yeah.
where the
Mhm.
government like puts out the story of like what happened, what started the fire, yada yada yada,
Mhm.
and then you're
Mhm.
just like, wait, but literally that is not true because
Yep.
there is like I'm talking about Waco right now, but there's like infrared video footage showing these fireballs coming at these angles and these holes that you put in the building that create this draft that makes this like crazy fire that
Mm.
can spread like super super fast. So it's like y'all
Mhm.
y'all lied about that
Mhm.
to boost the ATF. That was the thing about like when we were talking about FEMA too. I was like, this just reminds me of
Mhm.
Waco of when they like make this bullshit thing to try and like puff up this government agency that they want to look good.
That
Because the
they want.
government really wants
Mm-hmm.
their agencies to look good so that they can keep finding reasons to get money for those agencies.
Right. Which, I mean, the ATF and FEMA are really great examples of two government agencies that, like, do not even try to actually work.
Oh, no, no, no.
Like,
They're
I mean, like, both of
horrible.
those agents, they're horrible. And so, like, it's clearly a money grab, and the government has no desire to make either of those agencies functional. Part of their existence is to be totally dysfunctional and stand in the way of anything good happening ever. Uh,
Yes, yes.
and I wonder, I don't know if it's true that FEMA was, sometimes they say FEMA was in the buildings on the 10th. I don't know if that's true, but that's like out there somewhere. Like the buildings were closed, the towers were closed down on September 10th, and FEMA was in there doing something. I don't know if that's totally
Oh
true. You
my
know what we
god.
should
There's so,
do?
what? What should we do?
Well, now that we have our YouTube channel, we should have a 9/11 free for all panel one night, and we can get a bunch of other people to come on with us and just shoot the shit about
Literally, yes,
9/11.
because I want to
Okay.
know, and I
Yeah.
know we know enough people that know, because it's really, it's like kind of frustrating looking into it because like for me, it was frustrating because it's like, okay, so like I watched that like loose change
Mhm.
documentary, which I
Mhm.
guess is, people are like, oh, that one's so stupid, but I'm just like, okay, well, it doesn't seem very stupid, like
I
it doesn't
know. I
like
wonder.
it's
Yeah.
really just like they're explaining why these buildings like couldn't have fallen down in this way or whatever. But then it's like that's the thing. It's like the second you find the information, you're just like, oh,
Mhm.
I've already heard 100 people saying that this information is stupid and makes me stupid for believing it. So
Yes.
that is I mean, I'm not going to go into researching with that mindset where like I'm not going to look at the thing that makes sense to me and be like, "Oh, somebody told me this is dumb, so I'm going to not believe it." Cuz I'm just like, "No, but this is what makes sense." So that's what I'm going to
Mhm.
go with. The thing that like logically checks out the most to me, you know?
Right.
So yeah, 9/11 is hard. I mean, I think it's kind of cool that like everything we've talked about leading up to it is just like we don't even really need to go into the nitty gritty of 9/11 to like make the point because basically it's just like all this backstory about like how these people are like psycho liars that lie about
Yes.
everything and like
Yes.
yeah. So
Yeah. So, and they built their surveillance state just like you said. That's what they wanted.
right.
That's, like I mean, I tend to agree with you, when you're saying like, the call came from inside the house. Like I don't I in terms of conjecture, I tend to agree with you. It just I have no way of making that, I can't make that trail, exactly.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
that's,
there's no way.
right.
There's literally
Right.
no way we would ever be able to because at this point, and like with that quote from that journalist too, it's just really like,
Yeah.
okay, y'all literally like made it impossible
Yep.
because you like planted these seeds or just like made these people look like fools
Mhm.
and manipulated public image of dissent to like or not believing what you're told from the government into
Mhm.
being like a crazy person.
Yes. Yes. And they did it, and they did that willfully and with intention and consent.
Mm.
Well, so I think that that concludes our episodes on the Bush family. Except now, I think we're on for a
Wow.
YouTube free for all.
Yeah, I guess I would love to wrap things up in this episode assuming that we are going to get it out before this Friday so that if people listen to it
Yep,
before this Friday, which is October 29th,
29th.
29th.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, October 29th at 7 p.m. Is that when we're
Central
doing it?
Standard Time.
Yes,
Yep, 7
we are
p.m.
going to go on YouTube Live and we're going to launch our Patreon that day
Hmm.
and get it going.
Yep. And we're going to talk about spooky movies and ghost stories and fun stuff. I might carve a
Oh my god,
pumpkin.
cute. Yeah, we're just gonna have like a fun Halloween stream and talk about really
Hmm.
whatever. And
Yep.
I mean, I think that's kind of what we want to do more for our Patreon, which I mean, we've been
Hmm.
doing the podcast now for like a year, over a
Yeah.
year, which is really wild. And we don't have a ton of episodes out, but that's because it takes a lot of effort to like research all these episodes. So like I'm hoping that with our Patreon more when I mean ultimately like having stuff behind a paywall, even if it's just like $1 or whatever, I
Yep.
just feel like people are entering that space with more intention, which makes me feel like it's a space that I can speak more freely. Like I feel like we both,
Yep.
even though we say outlandish things on the show, I know that we both also hold back on what we say and feel
Hmm.
because we're putting it out to the public. So
Hmm.
I'm just excited for us to be like making a space where we can just speak more casually. And I think because of that, it'll wind up, we'll have a lot of like bonus episodes on there because we can just, I mean, we can really get going and talking. And I love when we
It's
talk.
true.
Like, I
Me
have so
too.
many times just been like, wow, this phone call we're having would be a great podcast. So I think that, we'll
Yeah.
have a lot of really cool, fun stuff to offer. We can talk about a lot more stuff behind the scenes, I think.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. Yes. So, yay. All right. Well, cool. Is that yeah, and like
Okay.
we have a Twitter if people want to follow us on Twitter, which we put up more information there about our shows and yeah, I don't know. We'll have a YouTube out where we'll be loading these podcasts up to YouTube also. So, anyway, yeah,
Yes.
that's what's happening.
Okay, well, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for doing all this research for all these Bush episodes. You have done an
It's so
amazing
fun.
job, and I really appreciate all your hard work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you, Callie, and I'll see you Friday.
Okay, see you Friday.
Bye.